I wanted to ask you about the differences in the types of dogs. I know you mentioned the Malamutes and all, but they look different in the pictures. Like some, the Norwegian dogs that were running the race look different from the those in the Iditarod. So I wanted to ask about that. And also, I wanted to ask you, do you ever lose any dogs in these races? And if so, how many and for what reasons?
So the dogs that we usually see are the racing dogs, the ones that guys really want to win is a mutt. The rules state only that you have to have some husky in it. And I think you see from my pictures that there are a lot of dogs that look more like a lab than they do a husky, but they have to have some husky in them. That was made a rule because one guy had raced standard poodles on the Iditarod, and they actually finished, but the dogs had horrible, horrible skin burns and stuff. So they stopped that immediately. The huskies have a coat that sheds ice and water, and so they're more dead. Some people will race total Siberian husky teams just for the aesthetics of it. They're beautiful. At the Finnmarksløpet, they had an opening for Greenland huskies and for Malamutes. It's the first time I've ever seen them used in long distance. They're usually used for pulling events, but these guys were in the long distance, and they were quite slow. We try to keep things as safe as possible. I don't think the Finnmarksløpet has ever lost a dog. We did have an event at the Iditarod a few years ago where someone rammed one of the teams with a snowmobile, and it killed one of the dogs. And but in both events, we really do try as hard as we can, especially as veterinarians, to make sure they're safe. I think the Mushers do too, and they're very concerned about their animals. And there's a very strong human-animal bond there.
Did you see a difference when you're working with them on the lead dog versus the team dogs?
Oh yeah, the lead dogs are your smartest dogs. They truly are like the quarterback of the team. Their word goes. They're trained to move around obstacles. They're trained to be the leaders. And even when they're at rest, you can tell that they're the leader. They tend to kind of command when they're going to get up, when they're going to go. They're amazingly smart and agile and beautiful athletes.
Dr. Morgan?
Yeah.
Question, Scott.
Yes.
It sounds like you've indicated that the mushers, which I guess / owners, are the mushers usually owners?
Sometimes I think there's about 75 to 25% split. A lot of times they'll be their own kennels. They will mush their own dogs, but that's not always the case.
Do you rely on them to let you know if they have a dog they think is in trouble, or because they're so competitive, do you have to, observe the?
I've never, even with the winners, even with like Nicholas Pettit, who was in the money, as they said, coming into the last leg 2 years ago, he dropped. And they asked him why. He said, well, my dogs weren't enjoying it anymore. Yeah. I think that says a lot. Scott, I've never, honestly, in the 10 years I've been doing the Iditarod, the Finnmarksløpet, I've never seen that side of it. I don't know if it exists or not, but every time I go, almost immediately, if there's a problem, the musher's going to come to you. And that accounts for like most of the times when I find something, is because the mushers did. This last one, we went up to Iditarod and was cut short because of COVID. We had a guy who was in third place, and his dog started coughing at night. It was just a dry, hacking cough. I actually thought maybe the dog just got some straw in its nose. Turns out the other dog started coughing, and we were trying to figure out what to do. And here he comes up. He was a young kid, and he asked what we were doing because we're all around his dogs, all these veterinarians. And we said, well, these dogs are, they're dry hacking, and we're not sure if it's really a problem or not. He goes, no, we're stopping now. So I dropped the dog 2 stops ago. That dog's is doing okay, but they had to take him to the hospital. I'm done. So right there, I mean, and that was before we even said that you should stop. And so he was right on it. He was like, I'm not going anywhere. And I see that a lot and a lot and a lot. I've never once in my experience, had anybody challenge us in taking a dog out. I've never seen that.
That's very reassuring.
Yeah, I think that the people really care. You know, they're doing this as a sport. There's really very little money in it. Not when you paid for everything, you know, it costs a lot to ship dogs up there, feed them, everything. And what do you get when you win? You get a belt buckle. And that's only the first time you win. After that, you don't get anything. You just get a belt buckle. So I don't know. I think people are competitive. I think the dogs are competitive. But I do think that people really care about the dogs. And they don't.
I have another question, then I'll leave it. You have this wonderful practice in Georgetown, you know, where I think your favorite clients. Why do you, and it's a wonderful practice. You treat nobodies like us. You treat, you know, celebrities. Why do you keep going back? Because it looks like it's difficult.
It's very rejuvenating. I like being out there in the wild. I like being away for a while. I like seeing the beauty, the raw splendor of both Alaska and northern Norway. I think that for me, it helps to re-energize me. I like the people. I definitely like the dogs. I love huskies. And so for me, it's more of a spiritual thing, maybe.
Lee, can you tell us about how they score and keep track of during the race? And
Yeah. So both in the Iditarod and in the Finnmarksløpet, dogs are given a microchip number. So, and they have to be checked in. So the dog that you have must be the dogs you finish with. You can't substitute dogs in during the race. And the reason for that is they don't want people, and this goes all the way back to the sweepstakes race of the 30s. They don't want people to run the dog really, really, really hard, drop them, and then take in the fresh dog. That would be and that goes all the way back to the 30s when I guess we didn't really think about humane reasons with animals, but they did. And it goes up till today. So there are a lot of rules in place to make sure that the dogs that start are the dogs that finish. We also pee test them all the time to make sure that there are no drugs given to them, performance enhancing drugs. There's to keep track of them again, as you come into the checkpoint, they are scanned, say, this is your dog, and it corresponds to that sheet that I showed you. There's also a GPS tracker that goes back to the headquarters in Alta, in Norway, and in Anchorage, in Iditarod, and that is you can get real-time updates on who's in front, what their average pace is, when they're expected in.
so I assume it's a accumulation of at each checkpoint,
Oh,
how fast they did it.
yeah, no, I see what you're saying. No, it's not actually. It's whoever comes across the finish line first.
Yeah, but you stop every night, and so
right.
everybody is caught up together.
That's right. So
it's the last run that makes the difference.
not necessarily. I mean, there have been instances of that, but basically, there are only a certain amount of stops where they're enforced a minimum stop. So that's for the safety of everybody, including the mushers. In the Iditarod, there's a 24-hour stop you have to take. There's 2 8-hour stops you have to take. Now, what the runners have done, it is a strategy, and it's really for the long haul. So the winners know that the tired dog is not going to run. So they do take an effort to make sure that the dogs and themselves, maybe not themselves, but the dogs are getting enough rest. We find that in a racing athletic dog, 5 hours of sleep is really recharges them. Doesn't recharge us, but for them, it seems to recharge them. You can tell by how eager they are to go. In fact, that's one of the hallmarks that we use to determine whether a dog should go or not. And mushers too, is if the dog is late, and we call it late in getting up. If they're still a little sluggish or something like that, that's an indication that that dog probably shouldn't go on. And in fact, we've taken them off for that reason, or people have dropped them voluntarily for that.
Lee,
Yeah.
have you ever ran a dog sled, been a musher yourself?
Yeah, I got to go on I took one out, yeah, when I was up in Iditarod. I got to take a sled out. It was great. It was amazing.
It was fun, yeah.
Now, luckily the dogs didn't listen to me because I didn't know where I was going. I was, about as good as musher as I am with computers. So, boy, you guys, I'm sorry not to bring it up.
No, don't mention.
I'm sorry about all this. We tried it before and it worked perfectly. And then thank God for my son.
Don't worry about it. You're doing good now. So
Yeah, now I'm doing good.
What month is the race held?
It's held in March every year, both the Iditarod and the Finnmarksløpet.
Because it looked like there was quite a bit of sunlight there in Finnmark, and that surprised me.
Yeah, no, they have about 12, the same as us. They're above the Arctic Circle, and about in March, late March, they have 12 and 12.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Both Iditarod and they're about the same latitude, actually, if you look on a globe.
Right,
Nome is
right,
about
okay.
where Alpha is. So those 12 hours and 12 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. How many dogs are in the race? Dog sleds on the race?
So in the Iditarod, there's usually around 60, anywhere from 60 to 80 in a high point. And the Iditarod will take, you start with 16 dogs. The Finnmarksløpet, there was about 40, and the dogs, there was 14 on a team. The Finnmarksløpet is a little bit, it's about 600 miles, 1,000 kilometers, and the Iditarod is 1,000 miles. And these are considered long distance races by people. There are smaller races, just like in road running, there's, slower or shorter races and longer marathons. This would be considered more like a marathon.
Why is, Norway seems to be doing particularly well on that, the Iditarod. Is that because they have their own race, or why do you think they're doing so well?
I thought both of them did really well. I mean, I think the organization is different because the challenges of the terrain are different. With the Iditarod, everything is predicated on snow. It's predicated on being able to get supplies up there with a bush plane, having places to land with a bush plane, being able to get the material up. The Finnmarksløpet is a little bit easier because you can get the supplies up just by driving, so you can go from one place to the other on the highway. Granted, they do have snowstorms and stuff like that, but their snow removal system there was amazing. I mean, we'd have a blizzard out, whiteout conditions. It would be snowed over the next day, and within hours, the snow piles were out, and it was clear, as you can see from those photos.
Yeah, how does somebody qualify for those races? Can anybody go, or
No.
is there a qualifying system like the Olympics?
Yeah, there's a qualifying system like the Olympics. Yeah, you definitely have to qualify for the Iditarod. Most people consider the Iditarod as the Olympics of the sport. The Finnmarksløpet, you have to qualify as well. Some of the bigger name races, you have to qualify. And the way you do that is by placing well or in other races that you can't, or that are open, that you can race. You submit your times to a panel, a jury, and they will decide who gets in and who does not. I think it's a lot like the Boston Marathon used to be. You had to have maybe not qualifying time, but you did have to show that you've been doing this a while, that you knew what you were doing.
There seems to be two elements in a winning dog sled team. It's the dogs and the musher. And how important are the dogs and how important is the musher? Or is it about equal?
I've always thought it was equal. It's interesting, the mushers that win are usually the same mushers that win. They have their teams and they'll change dogs from one year to the next. But it's all about strategy, there is a huge strategy to it when you take your rests. I think it's been shown over and over again that in the veterans, the guys who always win, always, you know, the Seavies, Mitch Seavey and Nicholas Pettit and
They do with the dogs when they retire.
these guys, the reason they win is because, in my opinion, they know what their limits are, and they know what the dog's limits are. They don't try to push either or of them. And so, because it's for the long haul. And they take good care of the animals. And again, unlike a lot of sports, especially with dogs, there is this, it's hard to explain, but there is this huge human animal bond that goes on. You know, these guys are sleeping with their dogs. These ladies are sleeping with their dogs in the middle of nowhere, you know, and they're all huddled together. And I think that's huge bonding.
Yeah, I just happened to notice that picture of those two dogs at the starting race. They really seem ready to race.
And you see that all the time. I mean, I was trying to get those pictures because they're just ready to go. I think the funniest thing was the one of the guy who was starting. He wanted to stop and get some food, and his dogs kept going. He didn't want to stop. And so that's why I showed that picture, just the sled team and the dog, because they wanted to keep going. They were like, well, what's the problem? We don't have to stop.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What happens to the dogs when they're ready to retire?
So most of the dogs, and if you guys are ever interested in adopting an Iditarod dog, are given out as pets. I can tell you, like, for instance, Susan, she just sent me something asking if Alley Circle, there are people all over the United States that are lined up to adopt these dogs because they're kind of celebrities and they're really friendly dogs and they go really well. If anyone's looking for a dog, please let them know because the dogs are wonderful house cats. They're not crazed. They're not wild animals. They adapt very well to sleeping on the couch. But
It sounds like participating in a very expensive operation.
oh yeah.
What would it cost for a team, and do they have sponsors?
So they do, and the Iditarod has sponsors. I think Finnmarksløpet has sponsors as well as the teams. It's very expensive. Going to Iditarod, if you're from out of the country, you have to ship all your dogs there. You have to ship your supplies there. You have to ship your food there. You have to ship your equipment there. I've heard things of anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 to do it.
What about the prize? The prizes?
Prize in the Iditarod, now in Finnmarksløpet, honestly, I don't know. The Iditarod was $50,000 and a new truck. So if you think about it, the amount of time it takes to train, there's maybe 3 or 4 people who can do this as a full-time profession. And those people aren't really doing dog sledding as a full-time profession as much as they're doing tourist things like giving, you know, there's a big tourist industry to go for dog sled rides and stuff like that. There are some sponsors. There are a lot of dog food will sponsor. Outdoor companies will sponsor a lot. But the money really has to come from their own team. And, you know, if you're not in the top few, the top ones probably just break even, maybe a little bit cash over. And one of the funny stories was one of the guys, I think it was Mitch Seavey, he won a truck one of the years. So I get to see that truck every day because my lawyer drives it. He wasn't very good at filling out his taxes. And so his tax lawyer said, well, I'll do it, but I want the truck. And so he gave him the truck. So I don't think any of these guys are, this is not like a NFL or NBA professional athlete. They're not pulling down a lot of money, if anything. A lot of these guys, the Mackeys and stuff, they look like they're homeless sometimes, you know, all packed up with duct tape and everything like that. But I do think that there's a huge love of the outdoors. And I think there's a huge love of being out there totally away from it all. And I'm sure competition comes into it as well. But you know, the bonding that comes from not only the dogs, but with the other people that you see. For me, it's always been a very positive experience. You do see some people are tired. I get tired. I get frustrated. Sometimes there's going to be a little bit of yelping at one another, but that's all it is. Nothing bad. And at the end of the day, you're just very happy and relieved, and it's a great feeling.
I have a personal question.
Yes.
We had a veterinarian in past years. We had a veterinarian in past years. He died last year, but he was a veterinarian at the Iditarod for many years.
What was his name?
His name is Carl Rogge, R-O-G-G-E.
Are they?
You know, it's funny. I've not run into him. You meet a lot of people, and
Oh, yeah.
there's 60 veterinarians every time. Okay.
Well, since he was local and you're local.
Yeah. No, I'm surprised I've not heard that name. What was the name again?
The last name is Rogge, spelled R-O-G-G-E, and he's in the Annapolis, Maryland area. He was a little bit older than you. He was born in 42, so he would have been like 77, 78.
Oh, there are a lot of veterinarians up there that are pretty gray in the beard. I unfortunately have not met him yet, or unfortunately did not meet him. One of the things I always thought was interesting, I don't know, Stu, who is the head musher, or head veterinarian, excuse me. He tends to I see the same people I've worked with from year in and year out a lot of times. I don't know if he does that on purpose or not, but it seems like my vet team is always, I've known them before. And there's 60 vets every year, so you think that I would see a lot more people, but I don't. I see kind of same old faces.
Yeah, now, I don't know how many years he was there, but I do know we had talked about in the past that he did go and worked at the Iditarod, so I was just curious.
Did you like it? Did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah, yes he did, very much so.
Yeah. Well, go on. Lee,
Yes,
you've seen the movie Toga.
yes, yes.
From a professional point of view, how accurate was that movie?
I think it was actually done pretty well. But the problem, what we have to remember with that, are we talking about Balto? No, we're talking about the other one, Toga. I'm sorry, I didn't actually see that when I saw Balto. The reason I was thinking what I was going to say is that during the serum run, we have to remember that it not only was one effort from Anchorage to Nome, there was a secondary effort that came from Fairbanks to Nome. So there were two groups, and it was a medical relay baton almost, the serum. They would go from one checkpoint, many of these are on the Iditarod now, hand it off to the fresh team would go, hand it off to the next fresh team, and they would go. So it was not one team that went through the whole way.
Yeah.
With the Balto thing, Balto just happened to be the lead dog on the last relay team. And in fact, it was 26 different teams that took part in that.
Mm-hmm.
And 26 times 16 dogs. And all of them are heroes, and all of them should be remembered. Unfortunately, Balto, we always have this thing, I guess, in the United States of celebrating the very first. Well, Balto played his part. I mean, he was a good dog, I'm sure, but so were, hundreds of other dogs that really braved the elements to do this miraculous thing.
I can speak to the accuracy of Togo if you want to hear it.
Of course.
I'm done a lot of research on the history of the Siberian Husky, and Togo was the lead dog of Leonard Seppala, and Leonard Seppala was a Norwegian originally. He had come to Alaska from Norway to make his fortune in the gold fields, and that didn't happen. But he did become a preeminent dog sled racer up there, and the story of the of the puppyhood of Togo in the Togo movie is based on a book called Togo's Fireside Reflections, which was published in 1928, when Togo was an old dog, and there was a it was Togo's memoirs. So that is mostly true.
Wow.
And the dog looked a lot like Togo, the dog they picked for that movie. The difference was that Togo did not have blue eyes, and the dog in the movie had blue eyes, but Togo had brown eyes. But he was a top racing leader, and Sepla was indeed asked to carry the serum. And then, as you said, they had a lot of the guys were mail carriers on that trail, and they just had native dogs. They didn't have special, purebred racing sled dogs. They just had working dogs, and everybody got together and they just had a relay, and that's really what the Iditarod commemorates, was that 1925 run, where they had, I think they got it through in like 5.5 days, which was just incredible for the time. And they had terrible weather. They had blizzards, and they had like 50 degree below zero weather, and it was just awful, but the dogs got it through. So it was mostly accurate, Togo. There was some cinematic stuff, and some of the feats that Togo did in the movie were exaggerated, but roughly and basically it was mostly pretty good.
Well, I'll definitely check that out. It sounds like it's worth my time.
It is worth watching, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when the dogs are racing, a typical race dog, how much do they eat when they're racing compared to on a non-race day? So in other words, how much more energy do they have to consume to be racing?
That's actually a really good question. I'm Jolene, is it Jolene?
Jolene, yeah.
Jolene, I'm sorry, I'm not very good with. The dogs need 10,000 calories a day. Race 10,000.
Wow.
So what we do now, you got to remember, you don't want to be feeding your dog too much while they're running, right? So a lot of them snack the dog with fish, frozen fish, treats, or protein meals in between. They'll take one of the things I want to tell you too was that even though the checkpoints, there's 26 checkpoints, those are the official checkpoints. Many of the dog teams will camp for several hours in between the checkpoints. They call it snacking the dog. Obviously, they do eat more when they come in because they're resting, and they can metabolize that much more efficiently. But they do snack the dogs in between the legs.
Okay.
It's not as much as, like you said, it's not as much as when the dogs are actually at station at the checkpoint, but it's a considerable amount because you do need to get 10,000 calories in a day. Thus, that's another reason why dogs are dropped often, is if their body condition score falls below a certain point.
What type of food do they feed the dogs?
Oh man, every team has a different blend, and a lot of times it's super secret. They guard that like Kentucky Fried Chicken recipe. It's based a lot. You see a lot of the native runners. Some of the Inuit community will have a very high fish-based diet, salmon-based diet, because they believe that gives the dog more energy, and there may be something to that because the protein that they use is much more readily absorbed, much easily conserved to energy, and there's a lot less byproduct. But everybody, they have their own formula, and a lot of dry kibble. Some make their own and dry it themselves. It's a whole thing. And they will not tell you. I mean, we do test them for drugs to make sure there's nothing in there. And they know that we test them for drugs. And so I don't think there's any tomfoolery in it involved, but the dogs are given a pretty high protein diet.
Yeah, I also just was interested in your other experiences. You were in Egypt to study mummified falcons.
Yeah, I wasn't actually in Egypt, but there was an Egyptologist in the area that had acquired some falcons from the museum. She asked if we could take an x-ray of it. And I was like, yeah, of course. She wanted to verify that they were real. And I said, of course we could do that. And it was very interesting. What is the x-ray? We found not only they were real, but in fact that they were not falcons at all. They were kestrels. And we knew this because we took the x-rays down to the Smithsonian, went to their bone lab at the Natural History Museum. And by using comparative specimens, we're able to look and find that these were actually kestrels. It makes a little bit more sense because kestrels are more easily kept in captivity, more easily bred. It's interesting. These were the mummies that you see with the falcons or kestrels and most of the other things were given as a votive offerings. You would go to a gathering of Horus, if that was your god of your city, and you would offer a prayer in the form of a mummified falcon. And they had dealers out there that would sell you the votive things, much like a votive candle in the Catholic service. You would buy it and then you would offer it to Horus. The interesting thing is, so there's a whole trade around there, and some of the people that were not very ethical would fill it with corn and just put the mummy around it, or fill it with nothing. And so it was interesting. One of the things we found out too that I thought was interesting was that the more elaborate the outside of the sarcophagus, the fewer intact bones it seemed to have. The ones that were really intact had very prosaic coverings, just brown wrappers almost. The ones that only had a few bones in it had very elaborate markings. I think, and when I put out my paper, I wrote a paper on this for the Journal of Avian Biology, was that perhaps it was almost a way of saying, well, it is just the source of the spirit of the falcon is in here, represented by the few bones. But we understand that you as the falcon mummy consumer want to have value. So we have created the deluxe version with this elaborate thing, although it doesn't contain as many bones. And if you want the one with all the bones, then we put more drab offering on it. I don't know.
That's interesting, yes. And you also worked with dolphins.
Yeah, that's right. I worked as a marine biologist before I was a veterinarian, and one of the things that I did as an undergraduate is I worked at Koala Basin Marine Mammal Laboratory in Hawaii. Dr. Lewis Furman at the time in the 80s was looking at the cognitive ability of dolphins. He had two captive Tursioptruncatus Atlantic bottlenose dolphins. One, he had taught a linguistic or language, if you will, based on acoustic signals, where different whistle frequencies and duration would represent different objects, different verbs, or different adjectives. Then the other one, Akea Kamaya, was based on a visual language based off of the American Sign Language. The idea was that each object in the pool could be given a representative word, if you will, and by combining the different words in different orders, it would show that they're not just merely recognizing a series of signals, like as a dolphin should, right, to do this, that they would actually process each word and understood the importance of word order in carrying out these imperative instructions. So that's what we would do. We'd say, well, basically in hand language, go to the basket on your right, not the one on your left, it looks identical. Take it over to the pipe and place it under it. And you could do that in a series of hand gestures. And then you could say those same words, whether you would say, take the pipe that's on your left over to the basket on your left and put the pipe in the basket. So using a variety of different, and I'm simplifying this, I'm sorry, but the idea was that you could study the comprehension and cognitive ability of an animal by asking it imperative questions based in this artificial construct. It was fascinating. I was over there for 6 months, I think, when I was a sophomore. And that's really kind of opened the doors. After that, I trained dolphins for a while as a true dolphin trainer. And then I did my master's in marine science at William and Mary, and I studied the genetics differentiation amongst marlin species. The blue marlin and striped marlin.
That's interesting. Does anyone have any more questions for Dr. Morgan?
I really appreciate you guys sticking around. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry about how I screwed up all this. I tried it earlier, it worked, and then I'm not good at computers. So thank you for your patience. I really appreciate it.
You seem to be good at quite a few other things. So,
Well,
and it's certainly a good talk. Again,
I'm
a lot
sorry.
of interesting things. So thank you for that.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate you giving us the presentation tonight. And we look forward to next month, for our next meeting. So please stay tuned and stay with us while we're out of our lodge for a while. So good evening to everybody and stay healthy.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank